Church proselytizer chucks propriety, chirps propaganda. In 2014, Ms. Victoria Wozni of Essex County, England, was temporarily suspended from her supervisory position at the John Howard Center, a mental wellness outpost of the National Health Service, otherwise referred to as the NHS. Her offense was a simple act of Christian kindness, giving a book to a co-worker, a young woman who happened to be Muslim. At least, if recent headlines of the Telegraph and the BBC claim are to be believed. While the Telegraph grudgingly admits, near the end of its article, that there were other factors in Wozni's suspension, the BBC adds nothing to its own sensationalism. In April 2016, after her second failed appeal of the center's decision, the Telegraph found Wozni lamenting that in today's politically correct world, no Christian can talk to co-workers about religion without being punished. But the John Howard Center's disciplinary panel and the tribunals hearing her appeals placed rather more responsibility on Wozni than on societal shortcomings. And the story is much richer than she and the large news outlets and the Christian propaganda mill have indicated. In 2011, Wozni suggested to her supervisor, John Wilson, that the center could establish a weekly worship service for its residents. She nominated her own Christian Revival Church to render the ministrations. It must be kept in mind that England is not a suburb of America. They have their own ideas about the relationship between church and state. The NHS sports a DSRCC, that is, Department of Spiritual, Religious and Cultural Care, which approved Wozni's proposal. A 3-month trial was begun, but Wilson, slave to the liberal agenda, required that services be broadly representative of Christianity and overseen by the DSRCC. In early 2012, numerous complaints were presented to Wilson. The personnel escorting residents to the services were themselves being proselytized. Wozni had been inviting her subordinates to church, which even in England is not okay. Shepherds in the church were instructing their new sheep to urge others to join the flock, all the while disparaging other religions. The services were not quite as broadly representative as one might hope. The congregation waved their hands in the air, hopped, jumped, danced, laid on hands, and spoke in tongues. The shepherds urged the sheep to participate in their flamboyant displays. Wilson terminated the program. After clearing up a few misunderstandings with Wozni, he invited the church to resume services, reiterating and insisting on his draconian mandate that they represent Christianity broadly. The church declined, but offered to write a letter explaining to residents why services had stopped. Instead of a letter, they delivered packages containing religious flyers and candy. Finally, enter Ms. Inya Nawaz, a 25-year-old Muslim woman hired for a position indirectly subordinate to Wozni. After a year at her post, Ms. Nawaz presented Mr. Wilson with a litany: gifts from Wozni, text messages, repeated invitations to church, routine 10-minute prayer meetings, including instructions on how to ask Jesus for salvation. Inya had confided to Wozni that she suffered from Crohn's disease, which Wozni dismissed as a fiction never mentioned in the Bible. During one prayer session while Inya was feeling ill, Wozni attempted to heal her with a laying on hands ritual. And at last, the Telegraph headline is of some value. Wozni gave Inya a copy of the book, I Dared to Call Him Father, about a Muslim woman who converts to Christianity. In an interview after the second failed appeal, the Christian Legal Counsel honored Wozni, allowing her to sing a dirge for the persecuted. I believe the NHS singled me out for discipline because Christianity is so disrespected. Kook Clubs, Kansas. In 2004, at Washburn University's School of Law in Topeka, Kansas, a Christian student group disqualified Mr. Daniel Arkell from its leadership because his religious views did not align with those of the club, a local chapter of the Christian Legal Society. This is perfectly lawful, and the university did not seek to disband the group. However, because the school is supported by taxpayer dollars, it withdrew official recognition, which had entailed access to university facilities and a measure of financial support. A similar case in California led to a 2010 decision by the U.S. Supreme Court, ruling that publicly funded universities are allowed to deny official recognition to discriminatory student groups. Back in Kansas, in late March of this year, Governor Sam Brownback signed legislation to override the Supreme Court. The new law is very specific, applying only to religious clubs, mandating official recognition by universities, full exclusionary practices ahead. And again, entitling them to taxpayer-funded school facilities as well as taxpayer dollars. In the same spirit as Mississippi's recently enacted Religious Freedom Law, the Kansas legislation refers to religious student groups as the potential victims of discrimination rather than perpetrators. Although some news outlets report that Kansas is the 8th state to enact a religious freedom law, it was actually the 17th state to pass such legislation, just before Mississippi in early April and after the 16 states already listed on the website rfraperils.com, run by law professor and establishment clause advocate Marcy Hamilton. Angola's opaque glass house. On April 16, 2015, a large cohort of police officers arrived at a shanty town some distance outside the city of Wambo in the southwestern African nation of Angola. Their intention was to arrest Jose Kalupateka, leader of the Christian millenarian group Light of the World. The pastor and his large flock had sold their possessions and constructed this village, anticipating the return of Jesus by the end of the year. While the reasons for the police action are unclear, by the time Jose was apprehended, 9 officers and an unknown number of the faithful were dead. State officials claim 13 civilian casualties, all of them snipers who had ambushed the police. Anonymous witnesses have reported to human rights advocates a massacre of up to 2,000, vengeance for the deaths of the officers. Outside investigators were allowed only carefully controlled access. The UN Council on Human Rights reports a long-standing tradition of egregious abuses by Angola's secretive, authoritarian government. When the UN urged a thorough investigation, Angola demanded an apology. On April 5th, Kalupateka and 9 of his followers were convicted of various charges, including murder and attempted murder, and given sentences ranging from 16 to 28 years in prison.